We're going to leave quite a bit of time after the presentation for questions. So about 15 minutes. There's microphones in the aisles if you guys want to queue up. And I have been asked to remind you that if you come up to the microphone, you'll be included in the videotape of the event, which may be broadcast at a later date. So you'll be preserved for all time with your brilliant questions. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce my guest, Sandhya Menon, author of the two brilliant and successful YA novels, When Dimple Met Rishi and From Twinkle with Love. Menon is an active Twitter account where she reminds her readers that her name rhymes with Sandhya Menon, which I think is the most clever pronunciation guide I've seen. When Dimple Met Rishi was a New York Times bestseller, and From Twinkle with Love published in May. So I mentioned the Q&A, but also Menon will be signing books. So if you have your copies and you want to get them signed, she'll be signing books at 11:30 here at the festival. So Sandhya, I want to start by thanking you for the absolutely lovely weekend, which I spent in the company of Dimple and Twinkle.
Oh, thank you.
I found both characters to be so honest and warm and true. And I found reading these books to be a really joyful experience. Was writing them a joyful experience?
Yes, I like to say that, especially now, I really look at writing as my escape. And so nothing gives me more pleasure than going into an office and getting to spend hours with characters who I know are going to be okay in the end, and who make lots of corny jokes along the way, and I get to write kissing scenes and get paid for them. I mean, I'm so lucky, so absolutely, yeah.
These are books that are absolutely about representation.
Right.
And how did you find your way into the voice of your young characters?
It was definitely trial and error. I was actually self-publishing before my publisher, found me and all that stuff. So I was writing for adults, and then the opportunity to write young adult fiction came, and I was absolutely having a moment like, can I do this? I've never done this before, and I haven't been a teenager for quite a long time now. So I had to go back to, what was high school like, which for me was extremely painful and awkward. And I didn't know what was happening half the time because I had moved to the US when I was 15, right in the middle of high school. But there was such great fodder to mine there because of those experiences. And although my characters are all American, they're American born, I think some of those high school experiences are very universal. And they're still burned fresh in my mind to this day. So I think I'll have lots of material for a while. And then plus, in my other job, I'm a therapist and I work with a lot of adolescents. So, I absolutely don't write about my clients, of course, but, it helps me stay current with what's important to adolescents now. Yeah.
For both of these characters, their passion, or I think when they're a little bit older, I hope their profession is so core to how they see themselves in the world. Why did you do that with both of these characters?
I think one of my favorite things in the world is passionate people. And I remember when I was in high school, I don't know if people have this perception that adolescents don't really know what they want, or they're wishy-washy, but that wasn't my experience. I think every friend I had and almost every person I knew in high school was absolutely passionate about what they wanted to do. And even the adolescents I see now, everybody has this kernel inside of them, and sometimes that kernel is stomped out, or people are told that it's not important and don't pursue that, and that's not a worthwhile career, but it's still there. And that to me is kind of what makes adolescence shine so brightly, is that it's just this entire world of possibility, and you could go anywhere and be anything, and that's so incredible to me.
How did you go about getting the details of their passions, coding or filmmaking? How did you get those details right?
So with coding, it was a lot more challenging because contrary to what some readers think, I am not a technical kind of person at all. So I had to reach out to a lot of different people in the field. My husband is actually in cybersecurity, And he had a lot of contacts. I reached out to other female friends who were in STEM and asked, hey, this is what I'm trying to say. How do you say it in technical language? You know, that kind of thing. And then also, what would a coder kind of think about? And, you know, how does she think? Because the way she thinks is very different from how I think, because I'm much more creative and a writer versus, you know, a coder. And then as far as in Dimple, there's a lot of talk about female coders, and that was my research. I just went online and read a ton of articles about, you know, the challenges that women in STEM face. And so I have some psychological research background, and so while that's not coding, research kind of has the same issues, and so I was able to draw on my own experiences for that as well.
Yeah, there's a great scene where she sits down with her idol. She doesn't win the contest, but she gets this chance to sit down with her, and they have a really frank conversation about the challenges women face in the workplace.
Right, yes. And I think that's what was so important for me, was that there has to be a female mentor. I am tired of, you know, this idea that there are no female mentors because this is such a male-dominated field. They're actually there, they just don't get the spotlight a whole lot. And so I really wanted to show Dimple connecting with this woman who had gone before her and done the things that she wants to do.
So let's switch to Twinkle. She wants to be a filmmaker. Yes. And she's writing all of these letters to female filmmakers. And I counted them up and confirmed with you beforehand, there's 17 different filmmakers that she writes to.
Yes.
Where did you come up with this list of women filmmakers?
So as I was researching this book, I saw the statistic that said in 2016, which was only 2 years ago, out of the top 250 movies made, only 7% were directed by women. And that doesn't even count, you know, ethnicity or LGBTQ community status or anything like that. So I started thinking, well, how many movies, because I love movies, and I was like, how many movies have I watched that have had women film directors? And I couldn't think of that many. So I went on this quest to watch movies directed by women so that I could write this book and know what I was talking about. And in the process, I also bought a bunch of books where female directors talk about their experiences and things like that, which was really amazing to kind of see firsthand what they were dealing with as they went through it. And so that's kind of my research, was actually watching the movies. Of course, you know, when my husband would come in, I'd have like popcorn all over me and I'd be watching Netflix. I'm like, go away, I'm working. You know, it's the best job ever.
How do you like your popcorn?
How do I like it? I like caramel popcorn, so I'm all about the sweetness.
Okay. Did you have a favorite that you revisited or that you watched for the first time when you were doing the research?
I actually happen to love Ava DuVernay, and I watched a lot of her documentaries. Like, I'd watched Selma already, and then I went back and I watched Middle of Nowhere and some of her other ones. And so that was kind of really like life-changing for me, because Ava DuVernay's story is just very inspirational, and Twinkle has a Ava DuVernay poster because, you know, that was born from my absolute devotion. So.
Did you see A Wrinkle in Time in theaters?
I did, yes, and I loved that. It was incredible. I love that.
I feel like there's something really incredible about the way she took this classic novel that so many of us had read and really turned it into what felt like a totally new story to me.
I know, exactly. And I feel like it's about time that we saw different people in the main characters' roles, you know, because I don't think any of us, when we read it, when we were kids, envisioned Meg as ever being black, because she wasn't in the book. But in the movie, she is, and it absolutely works. And I love that. I love being shown new worlds and new people in, you know, old kind of roles.
Was there a logic to how you paired up which filmmaker she wrote to with the contents of the letter she wrote to them?
Yeah, so this is kind of a behind-the-scenes look. When I first wrote Twinkle, I sold it before Dimple had even come out. And so at that point, I hadn't really thought, and my publisher hadn't really thought of a brand for me or what kind of books I was going to be writing for the rest of my career. So I had written this book as a very dark literary novel. And so, I know, what was I thinking? So when Dimple came out and it did well, my publisher was like, yeah, they just pushed the manuscript back across the desk. And they said, this isn't really gonna work anymore. So if any of you are writers, you'll know that there's no way to shoehorn an old idea into a new voice. So I basically had to delete 80,000 words of fiction and rewrite it. It's okay, I'm over it now. So originally it was very, with the literary novel, it was very closely tied together. She would very carefully explain what the filmmaker's film had been about and tie it to what she was going through. However, as the book got lighter in tone, a lot of that had to go. So sometimes you'll still see glimmers of that on the page, but I didn't quite delve as deeply into it this time. Yeah.
How do you watch films? Do you like theaters? Do you like watching alone? Do you like watching in groups?
I love watching alone because I get very easily annoyed by people who talk during the movie. And I'm like, I'm trying to watch. So even my family, I'm like, shh, stop munching your popcorn so loudly. A moment is happening. So I tend to watch alone by myself, especially documentaries, because not a lot of people enjoy documentaries, at least not in my family or my life. And so I tend to, it's like a very spiritual experience for me. I have to sit down, like me and the filmmaker, How weird does that sound?
Why do you like documentaries?
I feel like there's a truthfulness and a realness to them that I don't want to say you don't get in other films, but it's just on a different level for me. And I feel like I learned so much about different things that I would never have considered if I hadn't watched that film. So to me, that's why I like indie movies too, because they're different and they make you think and they present different problems to you than you're usually faced with, so.
Do you have a favorite documentary that you sort of press on people and say you have to watch this?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I should have researched this. Any of Ava DuVernay's, really, but well, those are they're based on her experience. They're not really documentaries, but there's one about, maybe you know this one, but it's about clothing waste. And it's really powerful, and it was recommended to me by a college professor like a couple years ago. I think it's still on Netflix, but it's amazing how much clothing waste happens in our country and ends up in the landfills. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you now about clothing waste, but if you're interested, I think it is on Netflix.
Great. All right, we'll look it up. We can tweet about it later and share it out with everyone.
That's true.
Something to look forward to. So one of the ways that I just found myself in these books is the way that you write about mothers and daughters. You've said in previous interviews that Dadi, who is Twinkle's grandmother, was one of your favorite characters to write.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit. Why was she your favorite?
So in From Twinkle with Love, Twinkle has a very different relationship with her parents than Dimple does in When Dimple Met Rishi. Twinkle's parents are very disengaged from her life. And while that happens a lot, I wanted her to have somebody who was unconditionally supportive of her and believed in her, even in those times that she didn't believe in herself. And Dadi was absolutely that person. But also Dadi kind of marches to her own tune. And she is very kooky and very eccentric and kind of strange. But she and Twinkle have this incredible bond that nothing can break. And I really love the idea of showing this mentor for Twinkle who's always in her corner, even when Twinkle doesn't really know who she is in certain parts of the book and she's trying to figure out, but Dadi's always like this constant. So, yeah.
Twinkle's mother suffers from depression in the book. How did you land upon writing about depression in one of your main characters?
Honestly, personal experience. I feel like when my parents and I immigrated to the US, I could see that my mother was struggling a whole lot with the move, and she was extremely isolated. She was actually a very social person, But when we moved to the US, she had no friends at all. We had lost a lot of our wealth and resources, and so she didn't really have a way to get around and make those connections anymore. People didn't understand her when she spoke, even though she spoke English, really, perfect English, but it was heavily accented, so people didn't understand her. And this was in the 90s, so there was a lot less acceptance, and so she spent a lot of her time alone at home. And it was a really hard thing to watch because as a teenager, I wanted to go out and do things and explore my new world and my new culture. And she was just completely shut down and shut in. And I wanted to explore that because I feel like we don't see that a whole lot when we talk about immigration and moving completely away from everything that you know, especially as an adult, how difficult that can be. And so I wanted to portray her mom in a real way, but also hopefully in a sympathetic way.
Yeah. I really appreciated that her mom is not magically fixed by the end of the book.
Right.
I mean, she and Twinkle have found a deeper connection, I think, and Twinkle understands her mom, but there's not this moment where it's like, poof,
right.
now you're not depressed anymore.
Right, yeah.
Which is very true to life.
Right, exactly. There's no easy fix. One of her big things that she struggles with is that her mom dies back home, and Twinkle's mom is not able to go to her mother's funeral. And that is a reality that a lot of immigrants face, unfortunately. And so that can be really, really, hard-hitting and heavy. And how do you ever get over something like that?
Yeah, it just takes time.
Right.
Since we're talking about hard topics, and you sort of referenced this talking about your mother's experience of not having money, but you write about class pretty frankly in both of these books. Mm-hmm. I love the scene where Twinkle is with Daddy and she's carrying this bowl of water for her, right? Mm-hmm. And she says it's the first time she's ever glad that they live in such a small house, right? And, or she's visiting her love interest, right? And they have this really nice house and they've got a special glass carafe for their orange juice, right? And she's like, we don't use the carton, right? That's
right.
it.
Like, what's wrong with a carton?
Yeah. Why did you include class in your novels?
Like I said, when we moved here, we lost a lot of our wealth. My dad was a highly educated engineer, but when we moved to the U.S., that didn't matter. We lived in free housing, where somebody was stabbed on my street for $11. There were sex workers on our street. Stuff was stolen out of my house while I was sleeping in it. So we were really, really poor. And I remember that I went to a little magnet school, high school, and a lot of the kids there were, kids of lawyers and doctors and engineers who had been here for a while. And it was so different seeing that kind of lifestyle when I was, my car broke down, my secondhand car that my dad bought for like $200 broke down. And so he had to get his work to lend him a car so he could come pick me up. And then meanwhile, these kids in their Beamers are, driving by like, oh, what's she doing? Is that vintage? What's that car look like that for? And I remember feeling so isolated because of that. And of course, I had friends who were also in similar situations like me. But it doesn't matter when you're a teenager, you feel so different. All you notice is these people have so much and it's so easy for them, and why isn't it like that for me? And I wanted to put poverty in a rom-com because I feel like it doesn't happen enough. And just like ethnic minorities don't have to have a book about the struggle all the time. Poverty doesn't have to be in books about the struggle either. So.
Right, it could just be a fact of a character's life.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Everyone always wants to know about process, right? You've written 2 super well-received novels while you have a whole profession on the side. Do you set yourself word count goals? Do you go into a novel knowing how long it's going to be?
So I have it easy because after I sold a couple of contracts, I have, I'm pretty much a full-time writer. I work very part-time as a therapist. So I have a lot more time than people who work during the day in another profession. But I still do set word count goals. And usually when I'm drafting, that's 2,000 words a day, 5 days a week. And that'll get you to 10,000 words per week, which is pretty quick. You can finish a novel in about 8 weeks that way. That doesn't count editing, of course, which is a whole nother ballgame. So not my favorite part. But yeah, I have to treat it like a job where I sit down at my desk when my kids leave for school, that's my kind of start time. Mm-hmm. And then I don't get up from there until I'm done with my goal.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you read while you're yourself writing?
Lots of different things. I tend not to read YA while I'm writing YA because then it like seeps into my writing. I'm like, did I just plagiarize that whole page? So that's bad. So I tend to read a lot of nonfiction or adult fiction to kind of balance things out.
And is there a prompt or a thing that you do when you've got writer's block?
Yeah, so for me, writer's block is about not knowing where to go next. So I realize then that I need to plot a little more closely, and so I'll get up and actually go somewhere else and plot what I need to do next and just brainstorm. Because when I'm sitting at the desk, I feel like I'm staring at my computer, nothing's coming, so I need a change of pace. Or if that doesn't work, I'll just get up and like go for a walk or a hike or something. Because I live in Colorado and there's lots of outdoorsy stuff, so you can just walk out your door and kind of get lost in the woods, and it helps shake things free.
Let's talk about rom-coms, which you already sort of mentioned. We're having a rom-com moment right now.
Yes, and I am so excited about that. Finally, our time has come. Right?
Well, and it also feels like we're having this moment of these refreshingly non-problematic rom-coms, right? Where you can like just lose yourself.
Yes, you're like, wow, that was remarkably sexist. You just slipped that in there, did you? I know, and I love it. And we were talking earlier about this, the rom-com with Taye Diggs where the assistants set it up. I love that one. I was so I could watch it 1,000 times. I love To All the Boys I Loved Before. I mean, yes, right? I love that it's become this phenomenon. It's just amazing to me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I think having more diverse rom-coms made them better.
Exactly, yeah.
You just teased your next novel, which is a sequel to When Dimple Met Rishi. Yes. So which was harder, writing your second novel or writing a sequel?
Oh God, the second novel. There's like no contest, no. Like deleting 80,000 words, I will always carry those scars with me. No, actually both the Dimple novel and the companion coming out next summer, they were both remarkably easy, and like, who am I to fight that? I'm just gonna go with it. So yeah, no, these were my easy novels. This Twinkle was the one that really hurt.
Sounds good. Well, do you all want to start lining up and let's get some questions from the audience?
That would be great.
Yeah. And I'll say, forgive us because we're a little bit blinded by the light. So we see you as sort of a shape. If we look puzzled, that's why.
Morning. Hello?
Yeah.
Hi. Good morning. My name's Marissa. First of all, I just want to clear my conscience, if that's okay, and check that you still have those 80,000 words somewhere.
They have been saved in the reject folder.
Okay. Very good. So my question is, what are some of the challenges that you face in trying to normalize or empower young adults reading your novels?
Some of the challenges that I face, that's such a great question. I'm like, where do I begin? I think that still people think that they're struggling to put me in a box. Is it rom-com or is it multicultural? Where should we put you? And more often than not, they tend to go towards multicultural. And I don't tend to like that box because this is a story about American kids who happen to be Indian American, but they are American kids. And if they were white, you would probably not think twice about saying it's a romantic comedy. And so this is why I've come to the conclusion that I'm not going to do panels or interviews where the only focus is diversity and how are you changing the landscape by writing these kids who are not mainstream, because this is mainstream now. And so that's kind of my challenge still, I think, is showing that this is mainstream now. But that's why I love the romantic comedies that we were talking about earlier, because that's all normalizing it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Menon. I was
Hi.
just wondering, that you've been writing rom-coms, you've been saying that you're watching rom-coms. What's your main, favorite part of, the rom-com genre?
Oh, what's my favorite part? Can I say all the kissing? Is that too trite? No, I'm gonna say something deeper. Wait, this is being recorded. No, all the kissing. That's all I got.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
my name's Olivia, and I just wanted to ask, I read your books, and all of the characters are very unique from each other. So how do you go about writing each character with their own unique voice and personality? And do you draw any influences from your real life from that?
Oh, what a great question, and thank you for saying that. I like to imagine my characters kind of like a mini movie in my head before I write. So I'll just think, I daydream a lot, and my husband that's not working, but I'm like, yes it is, prove otherwise. But I think that daydreaming is so important for writers, because you have to just sit and kind of let it marinate. You can't just start typing, at least for me it doesn't work. So every time I think of a character, I will write down the character's name and some basic details about them, and then I'll spend up to half a day, even for secondary characters, just daydreaming about the things they like, what they might do in a funny situation, what they do when things are hard, what they do when things are easy, that kind of thing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What is your favorite part to write?
My favorite part to write. I love writing endings. Endings are really fun for me, and I hate writing beginnings. Beginnings, just getting started. I don't know if it's the tyranny of the blank page, or I feel like it has to be the best novel in the world, or it's not worth it. I don't know. But beginnings always stump me, and endings are so great. I love writing endings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't believe there's not a longer line. I know you all have questions. Yep, they're getting up. Okay.
Yay.
Well, while they get to the microphone, do you ever let yourself write the ending first, or do you make yourself
No.
wait?
I absolutely make myself wait, because I feel like if you wait enough, things that you didn't realize before, you can tie together in a much more satisfying way in the end, that you didn't know, oh, this was a theme through the thing. So, and plus it's, it's kind of like saving your dessert. If you eat your dessert first, you don't want to eat your dinner. So if I just turned in an ending, I don't think my publisher would like that too much.
Hello, good morning.
Hi.
You've mentioned before, certainly, that that you have a husband and you have kids, and I'm not sure necessarily how old they are, but I'm curious how you incorporate them into your process, or sort of talking about what you're doing with your family and how they help you in terms of producing the novels that you've also come out with thus far.
Oh, yeah. So my husband is, he's got, I think I mentioned it, he's a very tech guy. And so he's got a very logical kind of brain, which is not so great with the creative stuff. But it's great if you have plot structure problems or other mechanical issues. He's great at saying, this is why this part's not working. And so I use him a lot for plot. And then my kids are 9 and 10, so they're a little young. But my daughter actually cried when she saw the Dimple cover, because she was like, it's somebody who looks like us. And she was so excited. And she keeps asking me every 6 months, can I read it yet? Can I read it yet? Not yet, you're only 9. So, yeah, she's my encouragement to keep writing.
Good morning. That actually inspires me to ask a different question than I was planning.
You can ask both.
Okay. Well, your covers for your books are amazing.
Thank you.
Covers are so important, and yours are beautiful and so perfectly rom-com-y. Can you talk a little bit about the process you went through, how much input you had on the way the covers looked?
Yeah, so I am very lucky in that my publisher consults me on the cover, and they actually send me model portfolios so I can pick the exact model. And on all the books, like there's the front cover and the back cover has like the male model too, which I love, so I get to pick 2 models and get to look at pretty pictures of models. But anyway, so yeah, so I actually get a decent amount of say. They don't ask me from, and I wouldn't want to be in there from the beginning to the end, but they say, this is kind of the direction we're thinking, what do you think? And I'll say yes or no, and then I'll request little tweaks and stuff, and they usually do them. So I'm really lucky in that, yeah, I get to do, I think, a lot more than authors typically get to do.
Can I ask, this is sort of the inevitable question, but other than the companion novel to Dimple, what are you working on next?
Oh, you said other than the companion novel? Oh, yeah, so I have a series in the works that I haven't announced yet, even though I sold it like a year and a half ago. So
We're breaking news on the stage. Tell
I
us
know.
about this series.
Oh wait, I forgot this is being recorded. So it is a whole new trilogy, and it's set in a boarding school. And it's a boarding school for elites. Like there are some royals and some British aristocrat type people, and they're based loosely on fairy tales. So while there's no magic per se, they are contemporary novels. There is like a, is it a curse or isn't it a curse kind of thing. And the first one is based on Beauty and the Beast. Thanks for asking that.
I'm excited now.
Oh, yay. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I can't wait till I can actually publicly talk about it. I'm dying.
Have you already written the first one?
I have, yes, and I just finished the first round of edits on it. So I know. I'm dying.
We've got a few more minutes. Are there any other questions from the audience? You all are being so polite and saving your questions. I know you're burning up.
Right. There's,
Yeah, please.
there's 2 of them.
When Dimple Met Rishi, I'm assuming was inspired by the Nora Ephron movie with the title, because it's like When Harry Met Sally, and I was wondering if the title came first, or how did you choose?
Oh, yeah, so it was actually originally Dimple and Rishi, very simple, like Eleanor and Park. And then my editor had this idea. She was like, what about for the Dimple universe novels if we take like a classic rom-com and change it up? And so when Dimple Met Rishi, and then the next one is There's Something About Sweetie, like There's Something About Mary. So I just love that idea. I was like, yes, because it's like rom-coms rebooted, like we were talking about. Yeah.
Do all of your books have happy endings or no?
Did you say happy endings?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. If they didn't, I would never be able to forgive myself. Yeah, all of them do.
Okay.
Thank you. That's so sweet.
Hi, I wanted to ask how you go about like planning or outlining your novels. Like, what is your process for that?
Oh, if you're on Instagram, you can follow me there. I post a lot about my process. I post pictures and videos and stuff. So I plot out and I use little sticky notes to do my whole arc. And if you haven't looked into the Plot Whisperer workbook, I highly recommend that. It's by Martha Alderson, and it's an amazing way to begin plotting your novel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. So I feel like we've been talking about rom-coms so much, so I feel like I have to ask, are there any movies in the works for either of your books?
Movies, oh. So unfortunately, like you have to have like a super duper super clearance to talk about that kind of stuff. So there has been interest in the Dimple books, but it's like super early days, and a lot of times things never happen past the early days. So that's all I have to share right now, sadly.
Ooh, something to keep us waiting.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. We should all keep asking for the movie adaptation to come out.
Exactly.
All right, well, Sandhya, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. And I hope everyone gets a chance to check out her books if you haven't already. And we will wait in anticipation, not only for the next Dimple book, but also for your new series.
Thank you so much, Phoebe.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.